Martin had a relationship with a young lady 3 months before Port Arthur and up to the night before the actual shooting, and that Martin had been with her for 3 months and loved her very much. Welcome to the Wasp Files. Some of this material may be distressing and viewer discretion is advised. Did Martin Bryant have love in his heart and in his life? Very interesting question. I watched the film Nitram, which was produced by Stan and directed by Justin Kurzel of Snowtown fame, both of whom I'd approached prior to that movie about making my film, Wasp, the Port Arthur Massacre. At the time, they said, no, not interested, I'm not interested, and then they went and made Nitram. I watched the film and I thought it was a very intense piece of drama, perhaps a tad underwhelming, but totally inaccurate. And in regards to that and the question, one of the glaring aspects that they ignored was that Martin had a relationship with a young lady 3 months before Port Arthur and up to the night before the actual shooting. That lady's name was Petra Wilmott, a young, very attractive red-headed girl with green eyes, quite intelligent, apparently, and that Martin had been with her for 3 months and loved her very much. Petra was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and she was asked by Ray Martin, "Why did you stay with him?" And her response was, "Because he was kind and he looked after me."
He was gentle and kind and would look after me.
Prior to Petra, Martin, he was quite an attractive person when he was younger. He was very fit, he had long blonde hair, very surfy looks. And he dated a young woman by the name of Janetta Huani. And they had some issues where he took her out on a fishing boat, and the boat, the engine died on the boat, and they were stuck out in the bay, and he was very frightened, and they were worried that they were going to drown. And there was some indications that that she felt him to be unintelligent and trying too hard to appear intelligent, but the bottom line was that he wanted a girlfriend. He loved his parents, more so his father than his mother. His mother had a lot of difficulties with him, but Maurice, his father, was very patient and trying to take Martin under his wing. Martin used to love animals, despite reports coming out about him being cruel to animals. I've seen photographs where he's cuddling koalas, and I think if you want to say the better angels of Martin's nature, if you consider such a notion, is that he tried hard, whether it was his diminished IQ or his antisocial behaviour, his mental state or psychological conditions, which have never really been properly determined and, in my opinion, treated. He found himself ostracised, alone, and he tried. When he was a child, he used to make little knickknacks, little shells, and little objects that he would take down to try and sell to the tourists for $1. He used to run errands around the town. He would sell local produce to people. He would cut lawns. He tried to have a gardening and a lawn business. So once again, whenever it comes to somebody who commits an atrocious, murderous crime, I guess the question that you should always ask is why, and just to also try and determine what turns some mother's little blonde-haired angel into a murderous killing machine. What were the circumstances that if it was Martin Bryant, turned him into one of Australia's most infamous killers. So it's very easy to demonise and to just say the person is a monster. But mental health is of serious concern. And I'm not advocating for any kind of sympathy towards Martin Bryant if he was totally and absolutely 100% culpable of what he did. But the question as to whether he is capable of love and needed some kind of help or treatment that he didn't get is a question, once again, that needs to be answered. Petra Wilmot is a very interesting case. She was a lady that came into his life 3 months before Port Arthur. By reports, she was quite intelligent, and that she was sort of controlling. I spoke to a person who had an interaction with Martin Bryant in a cafe, who was struck by the fact that it was a hot day and Martin was wearing a 3-piece white suit with a hat because he had some money and he dressed rather expensively and foppishly. And he mentioned that, whether Martin would be hot in that outfit. And they had a conversation. He said that Martin was a hard conversationalist. He had to keep trying to feed him to get answers. And then he said at some point a young woman came over and sat down next to him, didn't say a word, just looked at Martin. Martin looked at her, and that was it. The conversation was over. They got up and they left without a word. And he said the impression I got was she looked at him, and that look said, this conversation is over. I sent him a photo of Petra, and he said, yes, that's the girl. There is some indication or theories that Petra was a handler. I did speak to the head of the Risdon psychiatric wing, and he'd had some interactions with Martin while Martin was incarcerated there.
One of the strangest things, which is factual, was when they went to the Clare Street home. It was a cluttered mess with toys and junk everywhere and animal feces, and the one room was clear of everything but a table and 2 chairs, and on that table was some printed firearm and military magazines. So my question is, who was the other chair for? There were 2 chairs in the room. Petra.
Yeah.
You think, why would it be Petra?
She was his handler.
Is that what you think as well? That's certainly been suggested that was the case.
Look, it wouldn't surprise me. It honestly wouldn't surprise me.
This comes from a very conservative person who ran a psychiatric wing at Risdon Prison. I have records of that conversation. So it's a bit of a mystery. Petra has disappeared. You could argue, of course, that she would be horrified by dating someone who had committed something like that, might have changed her name and moved on. I can't find Petra. She appeared at one of the commemorations of Port Arthur and was interviewed. Seems like a very quietly spoken, intelligent woman. But in terms of love, she was with Martin for at least 3 months, and Janetta was as well. And so he did have girlfriends, and the night before Port Arthur, Petra and Martin went dancing at a local nightclub. They spent the night together, they showered, and the Sunday morning they got up, presumably departed, and then Port Arthur occurred on that Sunday afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wasp Files. Feel free to share far and wide and see the attached files in support of the episode. Thank you.